The aliens had energy swords, quantum cannons, and war fleets the size of moons. Humans, we had duct tape, spite, and a weapon so terrifying it was banned in 600 systems. A kitchen knife wrapped in a gravity field. One man built it. Now they call him Godfather. It started like most terrible legends in the back alleys of a forgotten moon. The station was called Ballora 9, a rusting trade hub orbiting a dead gas giant. It wasn't on any official star map anymore because no empire wanted to admit they still needed places like it. A place where smugglers, mercenaries, warlords, and broken things gathered. A place where the smell of engine grease was only occasionally overpowered by the scent of burnt ozone and regret. No one important ever came to Ballora 9, which is why they didn't notice when a human arrived. He didn't walk like a soldier, didn't look like a bounty hunter. In fact, his suit looked like it had been built from parts of 4 others, stitched together with black tape and welding scars. No rank, no name tag. Just a wide-brimmed hat that didn't belong in any century, and a soft, measured pace like he was always listening for something only he could hear. They called him Thatcher, though no one knew if that was a first name, a last name, or a warning. He didn't say much. Didn't need to, because it wasn't the man that terrified people. It was what he carried. Not a blaster, not a railgun. Or just a single curved blade strapped to his thigh, simple, dull-looking steel, no handle worth mentioning. But whenever someone got curious and tried to take it, they didn't get back up. So the first incident was a red fang bruiser. 12 feet of genetically modified muscle, tusks like butcher hooks, armor that could shrug off kinetic rounds. He shoved the human aside at a docking bay and barked something about soft skins not knowing their place. The human didn't even respond. Just stepped to the side, let the brute pass. But then the red fang reached for the blade. A hum, a flicker, a scream that sounded like a dying engine. The alien's arm twisted in on itself, bone turning to corkscrew. Blood orbiting in frozen droplets before collapsing into a pulpy sphere. The blade never even moved. The whole station went quiet after that. Someone whispered the phrase that would echo across the stars for decades. It is gravity-wrapped. And suddenly, no one wanted to get near the man again. The truth was worse. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a prototype illegal, unstable, and never meant to be used by a living being. The technology behind it had been buried after the War of Compression, when dozens of planets collapsed under the weight of failed gravity experiments. Civilizations crushed in seconds. Debris still orbited those scars in space like funeral wreaths. The science was outlawed. The researchers executed. The labs wiped out. All except one. And now it seemed one of them had lived long enough to grow old, bitter, and very, very dangerous. They started calling him the Godfather of Gravity Knives, not just because he built the first, because he was training others, quietly, carefully, and only the broken ones. The station authorities tried to arrest him once, sent a dozen bounty droids with armor-plated shells and black warrants from the tribunal. They lasted 6 seconds. No wounds, no blasts, just silence and wreckage. The droids collapsed into cubes, perfect cubes, compressed to the size of their own cores. It wasn't a fight, it was a physics lesson. After that, the bounty boards stopped accepting contracts for humans altogether. Things didn't truly escalate until a Crexian warlord named Shugaran offered 10 million credits for the gravity knife's blueprints. It's not to destroy them, no. He wanted to mass-produce them, wanted to build an army of gravity blade wielders. Thatcher gave him a smile and a date. That date turned out to be Shugaran's funeral. The story spread faster than light. One human, one knife. One warlord torn in half by his own palace walls, folded like paper around him. The empires laughed. Then they panicked. Because it meant the technology hadn't been lost. It meant gravity knives were back. This time humans weren't selling. They were choosing. Word spread like blood in water. Not just about Thatcher, but about what he represented. That somewhere in the shadows of the galaxy, humans weren't just surviving, they were rearming. Aliens had always whispered about human ingenuity with nervous awe, our talent for asymmetrical warfare, our habit of building weapons in kitchens, on the run, out of scrap and desperation. But gravity knives, that was different. This wasn't warfare, it was art with consequences. In the weeks that followed, Ballora 9 turned into a pilgrimage site. Not for tourists, but for the outcast, the disillusioned, the war-born and weary. Those who had lost everything and still had the gall to fight for something more. They called themselves the Folded Sons. Veterans from fallen battalions. Orphans of planets glassed in political games. Former pirates who'd lost the taste for loot but not vengeance. And at their center, the quiet human in the stitched-up suit, who barely spoke unless he was sharpening steel with fingers burned from the past. The training wasn't formal. There were no ranks, no salutes, just pressure chambers, gravity wells, and silence. The kind of silence that bends metal and breaks bones. Thatcher would drop a gravity knife into a sealed room and make them fetch it. Most failed. A few made it back alive. One came back missing time. Hours had passed in seconds inside the field. Those who succeeded, he taught them how to fold weight into a blade so it could cleave through titanium without moving. How to shift orbit inside a room without thrusters. How to kill a charging warbeast by making its own bones collapse inward like a black hole chewing cartilage. He taught them fear control, too. Because the knife didn't just bend space, it bent your mind. By month's end, the galaxy had a new name for them. The Knifeborn. And they weren't hiding anymore. The first official retaliation came not from a warlord, but from the Galactic Tribunal, the bureaucratic spine of interstellar law. They'd written the treaties, they'd buried the science, they'd ordered the executions after the compression war. And now they realized someone had escaped. The last surviving gravity architect was alive and training killers. They called him a terrorist, a war criminal, a threat to dimensional integrity, and they sent Division Null to erase him. Division Null didn't make threats. They just appeared. Silent black ships with no engines, no windows, no light. They operated outside laws, time, and sometimes even mass. Entire cities had vanished when Division Null arrived. People said they used non-time weapons that erased you from your mother's memories. They dropped into Ballora 9 without a sound. But they didn't leave. It happened over 11 minutes. Cameras shorted. Gravity warped. Local AI screamed and went blind. Witnesses say the station cracked open like an egg, but never fell apart. Time slowed. Metal screamed. Screams turned to chords. Blood turned to dust, then to ink. And when it ended, there was only one message left on the broadcast system. We warned you. Some knives don't get buried, they bury you. Ballora 9 was gone. In its place, a field of folded architecture, spinning silently in orbit, shaped like a single word in Terran script. NO. The tribunal backed off, quietly, permanently. After Ballora 9's folding, the Knifeborn didn't retreat, they expanded. No declarations, no empires. Just whispers and wounds. Ships began disappearing. Raiders were found inside out, bones frozen mid-explosion. Orc cruisers torn in half with no entry wounds. And always somewhere near the carnage, someone saw a blade glint in artificial light, spinning slowly in orbit before vanishing into vacuum. The Knifeborn were no longer defending. They were judging. That's when the emissaries came, not humans. Aliens. The first was a noble from the Vashd dynasty's 7 feet of armored pride. With 6 arms and a lineage stretching back to the First War, he arrived at Thatcher's newest outpost with one request. Teach me, not to fight, but to never be helpless again. Thatcher handed him a gravity knife hilt. The alien's hands trembled. By year's end, there were hundreds. Gravidar priests, defectors from the tyrant moons, even an empress once feared across 3 sectors, now kneeling to a man in patched-up armor asking if her blade was sharp enough. He taught them all, but never quickly. Because to wield a gravity knife was to become part of something deeper, not violence. Correction, the Knifeborn never took planets. They didn't crown kings. They had no flags, no anthem, no tax. And yet entire sectors fell silent when they moved. Pirates stopped pirating in certain lanes. Slavers went missing en route to auction moons. Weapons manufacturers started blacklisting their own products if the Knifeborn disapproved. It wasn't fear. It was compliance through legend. Thatcher didn't give orders, just made examples. Once, a mining company tried strip harvesting a planet where an old human colony had once fallen. They said there were no survivors. They said the resources were needed. A week later, every mining rig was folded into a perfect cube and stacked in orbit. The only message: graves are not growth, and then silence. Thatcher disappeared. The Knifeborn splintered. some becoming guardians, others judges, a few monsters. The galaxy thought the story was over, till the galaxy changed again. It started on the world of Carthus, a peaceful, terraformed moon, neutral ground for over a century. Diplomats met there. Families moved there. The knife-born never intervened. Until one day, a child playing near the riverbank found something in the mud. A curved steel blade, wrapped in cold and humming. The moment she touched it, the air cracked. Gravity shifted. The clouds coiled into spirals. Communications blacked out. Her heartbeat echoed across 20 square kilometers. They evacuated the moon. Authorities returned. They found the blade embedded in the ground. Next to it, words scorched into stone. I am not gone. I am only waiting. I am listening. The knife-born are returning. The galaxy doesn't know if it's to protect them or to correct them. For months, the blade on Carthus remained untouched. Not by choice. Every attempt to move it failed. Drones collapsed. Graviton cranes folded themselves into scrap. One technician reached out to touch the hilt and vanished, along with a cubic meter of surrounding air. The knife sat upright in the soil, humming gently, its presence disturbing the laws of physics within a 50-meter radius. And every night, it glowed just a little brighter. Across the galaxy, those who once bore gravity knives began to dream again, of cold corridors, of blood hanging motionless in air, a voice not speaking but remembering. Thatcher was calling them back. Wherever they had gaunt hermits on far worlds, silent judges walking plague zones, faded warriors trying to live normal lives, they all felt it. And they all started moving. The knife-born were coming home. The unified Galactic Council, sensing the blade's resurgence, held an emergency session on a neutral station orbiting the dark star Kretzen 4. 12 species, 12 empires, all once powerful, all afraid. They couldn't agree on what Thatcher had been: a terrorist, a prophet, a walking singularity. But they did agree on one thing: they couldn't let it happen again. So they did what terrified civilizations always do. They built a weapon. It was called the Graviton Walla, lattice of satellite-borne singularity fields designed to collapse gravity anomalies instantly. Cost trillions. Killed a moon during testing. It had one purpose: to contain gravity blades, to trap them, to trap him. And so they deployed it, wrapped the Carthus system in a silent net of invisible force. But when they activated it, the blade didn't vanish, pulsed, and the entire graviton wall folded in on itself like a dying flower. Only one satellite survived long enough to transmit a message. Not from Carthus, from somewhere deeper. You can't cage a concept, and you should know better by now. Ships appeared over Carthus, not warships, ships with scars. Modified freighters, forgotten corvettes, hulls hand-welded from old wrecks. There were no transponders, no threat signals, just a slow, silent drift toward orbit. One by one, the knife-born returned. Each wore a blade of their own making. Each one different. Some carved from alien alloys, humming with compressed weight. Others sleek and glass-like, bending light itself. But none spoke. They simply stood in orbit, watching, waiting. And in the soil below, the blade began to rise. Thatcher hadn't died.
Thatcher
Hadn't vanished. He had become something else.
Yeah.
No longer just a man. No longer bound to body or suit or speech. He had become the memory of balance, a legend sharp enough to cut through time. And now he was calling his children home. The knife-born didn't land on Carthus, not yet. Instead, they followed the signal to an old planet, long forgotten, hidden inside a trinary star system. Once used for industrial fusion mining, now abandoned. But as they descended, they saw the truth. It wasn't abandoned, it was evolving. Machines long dormant had restarted. Foundries reshaped themselves. Giant crucibles floated in vacuum, forging nothing yet glowing white-hot. Materials levitated in spiral arrays around gravity, anchors waiting to be forged into something new. At the heart of it all, a single black monolith. On its face, Thatcher's original blade, still humming, still cold. The message above it: every knife is a promise, and every promise must be kept. Inside the monolith was something unexpected, Recording, not digital, not neural, gravitational. Thatcher's voice was encoded inside a micro-singularity, decoded only by those who had been trained in the folded way. He spoke slowly. Carefully. You've made weapons. Fine. But I made a creed. Not to conquer, not to dominate, to correct. He spoke of restraint, of justice with consequences, of war as the last sentence, not the first word. And then his voice grew angry. Some of you forgot. Some of you sold your blades. Some of you used them to carve thrones. You failed the fold. The gravity inside the monolith flared. Several blades shattered mid-sheath. One knife-born screamed and fell to his knees. So now I give you a choice. Reforge yourselves, or be folded into history. The knife-born split. Some dropped their blades and wept. Others stayed silent. And a few of those who had built kingdoms in the shadows, who had twisted the creed for profits, to defy it. Among them was Carol Vox, once Thatcher's student. Now a tyrant of 4 systems, he raised a crimson-hilted knife and snarled, "He's gone. He's dead. He can't judge us from beyond time." The monolith answered. The blade embedded in it floated free, glowing brighter than a sun. And then Thatcher walked out. No longer aged, no longer human, just gravity given form, memory clothed in matter, wrath in motion. He raised the blade, and the duel began. The air didn't move. The stars didn't twinkle. Even time held its breath. Karovox stood with blade in hand, defiance glowing in his eyes. He had spent years building an empire from the shadows, training Knifeborn, who answered to power, not principle. And now he faced the one who'd taught him everything. Thatcher didn't speak. He didn't need to. Simply flicked the blade forward. The duel wasn't a flurry of strikes. It wasn't a sword fight. It was physics in rebellion. Carol leaped forward and vanished into a vacuum fold. Thatcher moved his wrist an inch, and reality bent like silk. Every slash compressed matter. Every dodge rewrote velocity. At one point, Carol launched a gravity wave strong enough to peel the surface of the forge planet. Thatcher caught it with his hand. The ground cracked. Satellites fell from orbit. Knifeborn above the planet went to their knees. And when the dust cleared, Kara was gone. A perfect cube of polished flesh, armor, and regret sat at Thatcher's feet. He looked at the others. This is not vengeance. No, this is the blade correcting its wielder. There was no applause, no cheers. The Knifeborn stood in silence. Some knelt, some dropped their weapons, some wept. And slowly, one by one, they walked to the monolith. Not to fight, to forgive themselves. Each one placed their blade against the black surface. Each was asked the same question, not in sound, but in weight. Do you serve power or purpose? If the answer was true, the blade folded inward, reforged itself into something new, lighter, cleaner, echoing balance. The answer faltered, the blade shattered. By day's end, the forged planet was littered with broken weapons and reborn warriors. Thatcher, now more concept than man, watched from the edge of the forge ring. His outline shimmered, less human than before. The longer he existed, the more he became pure intention, wrapped in memory. He didn't stay, didn't command, left the reforged Knifeborn with one final message. Go where the fold is thin. Correct. Protect. And remember, the blade is not power. It is a promise. Then he stepped into the monolith and vanished. 10 years later, the galaxy had changed. War still existed, but something had shifted. Governors negotiated harder. Slavers disappeared mid-transport. Warlords who pushed too far found their ships bent into crescents and hung silently above their capitals. No one claimed responsibility, but on quiet worlds and backwater stations, rumors spread of schools. Small, hidden, taught by strange mentors. They didn't advertise. They didn't recruit. But if you were broken, lost, orphaned by cruelty or shattered by war, you might be found and handed a knife, not a weapon. A question. At the center of this new quiet order stood no throne, no flag, no name, just a philosophy. Correct, don't conquer. And on the walls of every hidden school, etched in dozens of languages, the Godfather was real, the knife remembers. So should we. Years passed. Empires rose and fell. New species joined the stars. But whenever injustice grew too loud, when powerful hands reached afar, there were always whispers, ship folded in half mid-pursuit. A palace crushed silently in its sleep. Slaver fleet turned inside out. Its name never spoken again. Always, somewhere near the carnage, a simple steel blade floated in zero-G, humming softly before disappearing into the black. Children born on peaceful worlds heard bedtime stories of the man in the stitched-up suit, of how he stood alone against warlords, empires, gods of gravity, of how he made knives into promises and legends into shields. Some say Thatcher still exists, beyond the edge of known space, folded into the very fabric of reality. Others say he became the blade itself, or that gravity, in its silent wisdom, chose him as its keeper. But one thing is always true. When the fold thins and cruelty rises, the knife remembers, and it corrects.